Hi, my name is Rachel, and welcome to my presentation on changes in runes from Germanic to Old English. Well, to start off, we need to know, what are runes? Runes are letters in the runic alphabet of German-speaking peoples. The recorded main usage of runes dates back to 160 AD through the 13th century. What we have here is Anglo-Saxon runes in this picture. What is interesting about the runes is that each rune represents a phoneme and had a name that associated the rune mostly after things that started with that sound. And when reading the runes, you can read them left or right depending on the direction it is facing. We can find evidence of these runes from not only Iceland, Sweden, and England, as shown, but even from Greenland to Greece. The evolution of runes lasted through different stages, including Elder Futhark, with Futhark named after the first 6 characters in the alphabet, Younger Futhark, Anglo-Saxon Futhorc, Medieval Futhorc, which is the last and fully formed of the stages. So, beginning with the Elder Futhark, we learned that it is used to create Proto-Germanic, Proto-Norse, Proto-English, and even Proto-High German. It is the earliest known rune script since many of the Germanic tribes and communities use vocal speech. It is harder to find their written languages. Records of it date from 160 to 700 AD and is found to be pretty standardized until 700 AD when it developed into what is now called Younger Futhark. Younger Futhark is primarily known for usage in the Viking Age of 700 to 1200 AD. 8 of the original 24 symbols were cut out in an attempt to simplify the runes. In Younger Futhark, runes had more than one possible sound attached to them, so it makes it harder for us to read now since there is less distinction. It kind of reminds me of the evolution of modern English and the slang we use to shorten our wordings. Younger Futhark began to be used for a wider purpose, such as politics, religions, literature, and of course myths. The continued split led to Denmark keeping the long branch version and Sweden and Norway keeping the short twig version. Here we can see the split between the Danish long branch version and the Swedish Norwegian short twig version. And on the left we have the Elder Futhark runes. This, I thought, was a cool example of how the runes were inscribed on stones using cipher runes, the Elder Futhark and the Younger Futhark, on a 9th century stone in Sweden. The Anglo-Saxon runes were recorded from the 5th century to 1000 AD. Instead of Futhark, it evolved into what is called Futhorc. Between 4 and 8 runes were added instead of taken away like in the Younger Futhark. In some cases, a maximum of 33 runes were added. Christianity heavily influenced the usage of the Anglo-Saxon runes, and these runes were used to write Old English and Old Frisian. Here we have an example of the influence of Christianity with the inscribed box with a chart of Anglo-Saxon runes on the left. On the right, we have the actual Anglo-Saxon runes. Lastly, we have the medieval Futhorc, which is the youngest, dating since 13th century AD. Between the late 10th century and 1200 AD, young Futhark evolved to what is known as medieval Futhorc. This was the most fully formed of the stages. This transition was mostly focused in Scandinavia, and this period is also where we see the increase in bind rules, or the combining of 2 or more runes, due to Latin influence. So, relation to myths. I love mythology to begin with, but since the origin of runes was so mysterious in my research, I found that Norse myths had an interesting origin story I wanted to share. Based in Norse mythology, the god Odin hung on the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights to learn the meaning of runes. The runes were thought to have come from the source of fate, or the will of Urd. These runes were then carried up the trunk and branches of Yggdrasil to the 9 worlds. This myth is mainly where we find the belief that runes held magical meanings. And this is a picture of how the god Odin was perceived. So, a fun fact I found in my research was due to the magical origin of the runes, with the aid of inscriptions, other myths and folklore claim you could predict the future, protect a person against misfortune, or you could write down conjurations, curses, and spells. The practice of using runes for rituals and divination still lives today through pagan and ancient influences. There's actually a practice still alive today called Asatru that is an old Nordic religion still using runes. Many of the original Elder runes are similar in nature to our modern alphabet. It is so interesting to see the progression of written language from the Germanic tribes to the medieval influences.